Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to try and do this from the top. You're watching the Mojo Story. I'm Barkha Dutt. And over the next 2 hours, we will be analyzing the results of the exit polls with the health warning that these are not actual results, but of course, still polls. The actual results will only be in on the 10th. But here's what the big picture looks like. For the BJP, it will be a sigh of relief. The polls are suggesting at this point that Yogi Adityanath is headed for a historic second term. Most polls are suggesting a significant sharp drop in numbers. But despite that hit, Yogi Adityanath and the BJP are set to retain the state of Uttar Pradesh. This is what the polls are telling us at this point. And that is, of course, the big one, the state which everyone would have its eyes on for the larger political consequences. So that is what the poll of polls is suggesting. The polls vary in how much the drop will be, but most polls agree that the number of seats down could be as high as 80. Some polls are suggesting that that drop could be even more. Now let's take a look at Punjab. What we know from Punjab is that the Aam Aadmi Party is being forecast, according to the polls, to sweep the state of Punjab, and Bhagwant Mann and Arvind Kejriwal's combine has worked, and how, according to the exit polls. Almost every poll is unanimous in giving the Aam Aadmi Party a clean, sweeping majority. So the Delhi Chief Minister's appeal to give them at least 80 seats, that anxiety that there could be a hung assembly, that's not being borne out in the state of Punjab. So that's the sort of the two big news points. The polls are somewhat divided in the other states. They're giving a slight edge to the BJP in Goa, where pollsters are differing on that margin between the BJP and the Congress. They're giving an edge to the BJP in the state of Uttarakhand, and they're predicting that Manipur too will be taken by the BJP. So the only state that the Congress is mildly in play is in Uttarakhand at this point. Let's introduce our guests, and we'll do a detailed breakdown at which poll is saying what and what those averages are adding up to. We're joined by Dilip Cherian, who's of course an analyst and a commentator. Thank you, Dilip, for being with us. Gilles Vernier from the Ashoka University is with us as well. Welcome back, Gilles. We're joined by senior journalist from Punjab, Chandrasutta Dogra, who's actually been talking about an Aam Aadmi Party clear leher, as it were, in Punjab for days altogether. From Uttar Pradesh, we're joined by veteran journalist Sudhir Mishra. And we'll ask him what he makes of those very interesting numbers from UP. And we're also joined by PKD Nambiar, political analyst. So welcome, everybody. Let me start with you, Chandar, if I may. That Punjab result is actually, if it turns out to be the result, I have to actually correct myself. The Punjab polls, according to the exit polls, are sweeping victory for Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party. Does the margin of victory being projected surprise you? And please, can we have the numbers as soon as we can? Go ahead, Chandra.
Yeah, well, it's more or less what all of us, including you, saw on the ground. There was a huge wave for change. Of course, but I have to say that towards the end, the last 2 or 3 days before the actual polling took place, there was a concerted effort by the opposition, anti-AAP opposition, which includes the Congress and the BJP and the others, to again level the same allegations against the Aam Aadmi Party, which it did in 2017, that they are mixed up with the Khalistanis and terrorism. They could probably give a handle to terrorists again, and those kind of allegations came up. But what I think has happened, I mean, if these numbers are true, and it seems as if since everyone is as more or less consensus on the sweep is that I think it worked. It had an opposite effect on the voters because the voters are actually quite disgusted with the previous allegations. They did get carried away, particularly the Hindu community in 2017 shifted its vote to the Congress away from the Aam Aadmi Party, and that is one of the major reasons we all know is why the Aam Aadmi Party missed getting into power the last time around. But this time, a lot of those people who again confronted the same allegations towards the end of polling, I think they got quite disgusted, saying that this is getting a little too much. we can't possibly, that allegation by Kumar Vishwas, suddenly 3 days before the elections, he comes out with this thing that then the letter, which turned out to be a fake, incidentally, from the
Hmm.
Six for Justice, a terrorist, a Khalistani separatist organization based in the US, that we are supporting the Aam Aadmi Party. And Amit Shah even said that, well, he's ordering an inquiry against that letter. It's another thing that the Six for Justice said, that this is fake. We haven't issued any such thing. So all these things, when they were playing out, what I think is that it had the opposite effect. The people have rejected all this and voted for the change that they are looking for.
So
And
in some ways, it's in line with what you've been picking up from the ground. You're not at all surprised by this, that there was a
no, not
clear mood for
very.
change. Yeah.
Yes, yes, very strong mood, and I think some of the drawbacks of the Aam Aadmi Party, which we were seeing during the election campaign, I think those problems have been surmounted. The wave, if at all, these numbers are true, it seems to have overtaken everything, such as they didn't have enough volunteers on the ground, and there were those worries that they wouldn't have their booth management would be very poor. How will they get the voters to come and actually vote? Even if there is a mood for change, it has to translate into actual votes, and for that, again, it's the people on the ground, the volunteers, they have to work hard to ensure that those votes actually fall into the ballot boxes. So there were a lot of fears during the campaign that this may not happen, and there were problems in some constituencies which we saw during the
Yeah. So let
campaign.
me let,
Yes.
let, let me bring up the numbers. Let me bring up the numbers, the poll of polls, before I get the rest of the panel to respond. So here on your screen, you can see what different surveys are actually predicting. We start with the party in every state that's the incumbent. So if you're trying to figure out why we've placed a certain order, the first party in the screen will always be the incumbent party. Now here's what it's looking like. These are three different surveys, and the parties that are being forecast, rather the seats that are being forecast for the Aam Aadmi Party, the range is between 51 to 61 according to the C Voters survey, 76 to 90 according to the Access survey, and 70 according to the Times Now veto survey. And I think we also have some other surveys, and we will bring you those as well. But what's very interesting is that the Congress seat forecast and the Akalis, at least in one survey, is roughly the same. And even in the second survey, it's close to about 19. So, in other words, the Akalis may actually do just as well or just as badly as the Congress. And it's just a clear win. All of those sort of political whispers about a hung assembly and how the others may come together to try and stop and block Kejriwal. If these numbers are true, Gilles, none of that is going to be needed.
No, of course, and I mean all the usual caveats, really, apply here. These are just seat projections; they're not indications about how parties' lines have shifted in terms of vote share. What we know from Indian elections is that small swings, particularly in competitive elections, in fragmented elections, small swings of vote share can create large effects. And so right now, it looks like these numbers do predict, four victories for the BJP and for AAP in Punjab. My sense is that within 3 days, we should see that small variations in vote shares might possibly upset some of these results. Now, obviously, in Punjab, the
What do
indication
you
is that
what do you make of the range? What do you make of the range? Is the range broad enough for these numbers to present anything very distinctly different, according to you?
See, the range for me is a reflection of the variety of methods that are used and the variety of techniques of sampling used by different pollsters. I don't take these variations as factual variations. In fact, I don't take these. I take these exit polls as indicative at best, and not necessarily reflective of actual results. And so what strikes me is that you seem to have far more pollsters in this year than 5 years ago. And so that also, numbers seems to have doubled somehow. And so that also, statistically increased the chance of seeing all these variations.
Yeah, that's a funny point about the number of pollsters doubling because they literally have, despite the fact that exit polls get it wrong so often. But what's interesting, Dilip, is that this time there isn't a dramatic variation between the polls when it comes to Punjab, at least. We look at UP, the next big one in some time from now. But your thoughts, because Charanjit Channi was clearly a good political discovery. He had a lot of goodwill on the ground. What does this suggest? Because Kejriwal is also not completely new. When Chandar says that people wanted to vote for change, a similar landslide was predicted for the AAP the last time, and it didn't happen. But all the polls seem unanimous this time. Dilip, does it surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me because, as Gilles said, the number of pollsters has multiplied beyond belief. Um, I had a set of people in Punjab, and they gave me a figure of which falls in line with this. So there has been a pickup for this message, and everybody was hoping that AAP would uh, take a downslide with that Kumar Vishwas statement, which to my mind came far too close to the elections to really matter. Uh,
Hmm.
do these exit polls therefore reflect the final figures? We've seen exit polls go hilariously wrong, and Bengal is a case where every pollster had it wrong.
Yeah.
So I would say that one needs to be careful, but indicatively, this seems to suggest that Aam Aadmi Party is ahead and may actually be able to form a government on its own. So that is an interesting new phenomena, which contradicts the great showing that Channi has done. And if you ask me the direct reason for it, it is really the inability of the Congress Party to get its act together in time and to have had a divided house all the way to election day, and that really is what would be analyzed as the reason for their failure, if indeed the results show that.
That's actually a very important point because a number of people I met while traveling through Punjab would say things like, yes, we like Chani, but we don't even know if he's going to be made chief minister if they win. If he is made chief minister, Sidhu won't let him breathe a day. And you would pick up this sort of disquiet among people, even Congress voters. A number of Congress voters said this to me. Pikiti Nambiar, the Aam Aadmi Party likes to say that the BJP or the BJP supporters or the Akali Dal supporters would rather have a Congress party in Punjab than Kejriwal. There seems to be, Kejriwal position Punjab is up versus the rest. I know you have family links with Punjab, so I'd love your take on what the polls are saying.
In fact, as we speak, I'm hosting at least 7 Punjabis at my home. So
Are
there
you
are
are
people.
you are you are you feeding them food from Kerala or are you feeding them butter chicken and
it's a
paneer?
it's a
What
it's
are
a
you feeding them?
it's a combination of both. So the idea is that, see, then nobody can predict Punjab. Let me tell you, nobody on this earth can predict Punjab. Forget about the polls, or for that matter. And especially when, on a serious note, the Punjab has also got a multiple dimensions. One is the farming community, जो पिंड वाला जो voters है, or the share वाला जो voters है, they are absolutely way different in their
So when
thinking.
you're saying nobody can predict Punjab, you don't believe these numbers.
Absolutely no. So I'll tell you, even in
Okay, let's
2017,
let's bring
it
them
did
up
not.
again. Let's take another look at Punjab as Mr. Nambia makes his point. Go ahead,
Yes.
Pikiti.
So I'll tell you one thing very clearly, that for an example, Akali. Till, I mean, even these numbers are still showing something little better for Akalis. If you really remember that, even in the till 2 months ago, nobody was even talking about Akali Dal in Punjab. No national media, nobody was even talking about. It was all about Channi versus Kejriwal. But whereas now all the exit polls are showing there is a number of. I mean, if at all these numbers are true, Akali Dal may become the principal opposition party. So the Punjab do not behave consistently all across the board in the same level in many other states. Punjab within the constituencies do not behave in the same level. They have a
So
different
you
kind
don't
of.
you don't I have a feeling you don't want to believe these numbers, but when I quote the same posters of UP, you'll
This is
believe them.
only for Punjab. I would say this is
Yeah, that's what
only
I'm
for
saying.
Punjab.
These
Yeah.
caveats are wonderful depending on people's political leanings. But Gilles, before I go to Sudhir ji, feel free. I don't know if you want to come in on Punjab. I know you're basically from Uttar Pradesh, but आप कुछ बोलना चाहें तो जरूर इस पे आप अपनी टिप्पणी दीजिएगा. Gilles, I want to bring you back in. You sounded very skeptical somehow in your first responses to these numbers. Why is that? Because there's no surprise in these numbers not tallying with what most reporters, including myself, were carrying back from Punjab in terms of picking up the mood on the ground.
No, there's no surprise in overall direction, but what remains unknown is the amplitude of those victories or defeat, according to which standpoint you choose. And my sense, and also from the experience of looking at exit polls, from previous elections, is that indeed, the range of the gap between prediction and reality can be actually, pretty large. I remember in 2017 in UP that no one actually had picked up that those huge, result by the BJP. No one had forecast that even the pro BJP pollsters or the friendly, pollsters did not pick up, the amplitude of the BJP victory. And so from what we know, all I'm saying is that it can go, in either directions in most states. Look at the gap, the variation, the range, in UP. It placed the different exit polls place the BJP to 210 to almost 270.
Yeah.
These are two very different election stories to tell. If
Fair
if we
enough. Fair
if
enough.
it is-
So basically, the best we can do is to look for broad patterns in these numbers because you're absolutely right that the
That's
range
right.
is very, very broad. One of the patterns that's coming up from the polls, and this is important, Chandar, if you want to jump in on this, is that the idea of Charanjit Channi being a Dalit face, the first Dalit chief minister of Punjab, this is not automatically transferred the Dalit vote if these numbers are correct, and I have to keep saying if, it hasn't automatically transferred the Dalit vote to the Congress. In fact, polls are suggesting that the Dalit vote is squarely divided between the Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress. Chandar, your thoughts?
Which we all wanted to know where would the Dalit vote go. Would it? So it's quite obvious that Charanjit Channi hasn't been able to draw more than probably his own subcaste of Ravi Dasias and maybe a little more. I'm told that the well-off Dalits in towns, particularly in the Jalandhar Dwaba area, have voted for the Congress oblique Charanjit Channi because of. But what I think has happened is that Arvind Kejriwal's he had reached out to the Dalits, and the Dalits were actually rooting for him, just looking at the Delhi model. This is what the Aam Aadmi Party tried to sell during the elections. That and the Dalits were particularly enamored with that model because he was promising to bring good schools, good hospitals, etc. And because we find that in Punjab, the school infrastructure is absolutely in a shambles, the health infrastructure, and it is the lower strata of society, mostly the scheduled caste, who actually suffer, and their children don't get good education. They don't have access to very good health facilities because the private hospitals and doctors are very, very expensive. So this was the segment which is looking at Arvind Kejriwal to improve their lot in life. And I think where they did not put their trust in Charanjit Channi is, even though he was projected as a chief ministerial candidate, because at the end of the day, they saw him as the same, no change really, because he would do the Congress's bidding, he would do the bidding of the party high command in Delhi. So I mean, he didn't really inspire the Dalits as much as we thought that he would. Yeah.
Okay, Dilip, if you and PKD want to jump in on this, I'll come to you first. You alluded to the factionalism and the late decision making by the Congress. Many things went terribly wrong for the Congress campaign. You had Sunil Jakhar going public with his disquiet, actually packing his bags and leaving. And later, in fact, in an interview to me and many others, he spoke about how he felt shafted because he was Hindu. You had Navjot Sidhu being a power unto himself. You had Channi not declared as a chief ministerial candidate till very late. Even so, you have PKT Nambiar who's not convinced about these numbers. Almost everyone but Aam Aadmi Party has been punting on a hung assembly. I mean, do you think that might still happen?
I don't think so. I think the electoral verdict in Punjab is going to be pretty much clear and unequivocal. Anyone who expects that the polls will be the results will be an exact replication of the polls is also wrong. But is this indicative? I think it very clearly is. Has there been this indication on the ground? People on the ground who have done surveys, who have meticulously combed through the data, have felt that this was one state where there looked like there was a leher, because the figures that we are talking about really indicate that there was a kind of massive change, and that is something that pollsters usually are able to pick up even with the blunt instruments that they have at hand.
Yeah. PKT, are you still not convinced at all?
No, I'll tell you why. The reason being, if you really look at in Punjab, the last 2 weeks of the before the poll, there was a huge change which was taking place all across. All the deras and deras such as Sauda, and there are large number of deras, and all these deras have absolutely a captive vote, or rather, on their command, there are large number of votes can swing. On the other there is almost 40 to 45 percentage of Hindu votes, and if you re, break down these Hindu votes, there is a large number of this business community, Bania community, and then Khatris, etc. They all have been able to maybe further little bit more of consolidation because of this, some of this Khalistani connect, because there is a
Yeah.
Hindus in Punjab do believe that Khalistani movement is going to, because they had to go through during the terrorism time.
I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but these numbers suggest that actually the Aam Aadmi Party was able to do what the Congress tried. The Congress wanted its kind of Amar Akbar Antony moment, with Channi being the Dalit face, Sunil Jakhar being the Hindu face, and Sidhu being the Jat Sikh face. That combination, Kejriwal seems to have managed much more effectively, Mr. Nambiar, with himself being the Hindu face. They have a Dalit face, and in Bhagwant Mann, they have their Jat Sikh face.
No, I'll tell you. This is, see, there is no doubt that Kejriwal has not been able to make him. He has done extremely good as far as it's only going all the way from Delhi and being able to make it. There is no. I'm not going to question that. But will he be able to make it as a government? That is where my question is. I mean, I have my all doubts. Another thing is that there is going to be another interesting stuff. Mark my words. Sidhu is out of politics in Punjab. Out of this, after this poll.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
think I think that might be something that everybody agrees on. There'll be some cross-party unanimity on Navjot Sidhu, because he certainly was with the BJP. He flirted with the Aam Aadmi Party, and he's now in the Congress. I don't know whether
there is no
Chandra.
other party to go. There is no other party for
Well,
him to
there's
go.
still the Akalis, but Chandra, quickly on Sidhu, I want to turn to the numbers from Goa and Uttarakhand. But Chandra, if you want to add a comment, we'll come back to Punjab. I just want to go through all the states.
Yeah, just wanted to say one thing, that when the turnout was lower than last time, almost 5% down, everyone predicted that yes, it could be a fractured verdict, and people were disillusioned, people were frustrated, even exasperated with so many players, the Congress fighting amongst itself, and all those things. But now, as these numbers suggest, it appears as if the people who did not come out to vote were quite clearly the Congress voters, because they were actually very, very disgusted with the goings on in the party. And a lot of senior Congress leaders did not even come out to campaign. Now, there is this internal infighting going on even now, and people, I think Ravneet Bittu, a senior MP, has said that he's going to name some of those people who didn't come out. So all those things are happening, which means that it is the drop in the percentage is mainly the Congress voters who did not come out to vote. The Aam Aadmi Party seems to have taken its has got its voters to come out and make their uh, put their
Yeah.
ballots. Yeah.
Okay, let's turn our attention to Goa and Uttarakhand. Manipur, the polls are projecting, will go easily to the BJP, and that's what we're getting from the polls. But let's look at Goa and Uttarakhand, which are small states, more neck and neck than the other states. But even so, the slight edge is being given to the BJP. This is what Goa looks like right now. And you can see, Gilles, I particularly like your comment on this because the margins are not that wide or varied when it comes to Goa. The Trinamool, this could mean, of course, the end of Mamtadi's national sort of aspirations, especially when juxtaposed with, Kejriwal possibly winning Punjab. So this is what the three sort of surveys we have. I think we have some more, but this is broadly a pattern that's emerging. Gilles, your thoughts on Goa?
I would not necessarily call it the end of Mamata Banerjee's national ambitions or to become a national party, because I think she will do well in Manipur, and there's also other places where the Trinamool can grow. But Goa seems to throw a fairly usual result, which is basically fairly undecided, and which means sadly that the outcome is likely to be determined after the results and not by the results,
Which is a familiar story, and it is quite neck and neck in the.
which is a familiar story. Perhaps an alliance is going to be possible between AAP and Congress, but given the history between these two parties, that still seems unlikely. AAP would probably prefer to remain in a nuisance factor or a disturbance factor, if you prefer, in Goa politics, rather than a second fiddle to the Congress party, which it opposes in national and state politics. And
This is in the poll of polls. If you don't look at the individual surveys and you look at the poll of polls,
yeah,
which is of course a mathematical aggregation and has
yeah.
its own problems, the BJP and the Congress are actually neck and neck. The BJP and the Congress are neck and neck.
Yeah, no, exactly, and none of them seem to have enough. But keep in mind that we don't have all the polls yet. Some of the most important ones, C Voters, Access, CSDS, are not out yet. They tend to be more reliable than those we have seen so far. So by the end of the evening, I would not be surprised if those numbers actually change a little bit.
Okay, so this is what Goa is looking like. Anyone wants to add a comment here? PKD, Dilip, if anything leaping out here, do you agree with Jill that this is a state that almost always or often enough gets decided at the after the results? In fact, I remember I'm meeting a legislator in Goa who switched parties 3 times, and he told me that last time the Congress's inability to hustle and form the government was the beginning of the decline of the Congress. But these numbers might suggest otherwise. It's still in the race in the neck and neck way, but as Jill said, Dilip, it could all happen after the result.
The indication at the moment seems to be that the Congress is all set to ensure that last time's disastrous decision making incapability does not show itself post election. So I'm told plans are afoot to move legislators between the next few days into a safe spot in Rajasthan. So let's see if the Congress actually gets its act together before election results are actually out.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Nambiar, any thoughts on Goa?
Goa
You're
is
on mute. Yeah, go ahead.
See, the Goa is, if you're talking about 13 to 17, the last time, if you really recall, in 2017, it was only 13 seats the BJP got, and they made a government. So I think the Goa is all about not exit polls. Once the poll is done, the Goa's real election and selection changing. 65% of the people have changed their parties even post-election. So I think nobody can predict again the post-election result change in Goa. Nobody's of anyone, but I think some 30% of the BJP is the only party which has got 30 to 40% of their leaders have been consistent. Rest all the people have changed parties here and there. So there is most of the surveys are saying that even after 10 years, if this BJP is able to get 17 or in 20 seats, that's pretty good. Then of course easily they will be able to make the government, because you have so many other one or two, even if it an Aam Aadmi party and many independents. Let me tell you, Goa will always emerge. There are some strong candidates in Goa, irrespective of political affiliation, they win.
In Goa, the voters always say they vote for the candidate and not for the
Candidate,
party.
not the party, always.
Not the
Yes.
party, and that is one of the
Yes.
things you constantly get told by Goa voters. We'll come back to I want to explore what Gilles said, that it may not be the end of Mamata Banerjee's national aspirations, but let's go through the other states first. Uttarakhand, if we can turn our attention to Uttarakhand. Now, remember, this is a state where again the polls have predicted a neck and neck battle, but Harish Rawat very sadly gave many interviews saying he really wanted to be his party to declare a chief ministerial candidate, but the party declined to do so. And this is what Uttarakhand is looking like at a broad glance. I'm not sure if we have any other surveys as well. Aam Aadmi Party, for all that noise, has failed to achieve much there. Uh, these numbers actually do vary between these two surveys, at least. Gilles, any early thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this was, the election for the Congress, to win. And, just like Punjab, they probably have, squandered it, on their own. But that being said, from what I remember, the BJP is actually losing quite a bit of ground compared to 2017. So no one, can really claim to have attracted, a surge of, popular support. And it basically gives us that, divided mandate. But again, I mean, if you look at the ranges, you see that these parties may be closer to one another than we might think.
That's the thing, that small margins could actually
Exactly.
change, in individual seats. Dilip, any thoughts on Uttarakhand?
I tend to agree with Gilles that the numbers look very close, but on the ground, most people who've been there and who've talked to people there and who've done surveys seem to feel that the multiple changes in the BJP leadership over the last couple of years is likely to have browned off the voter there, and we're not seeing those numbers reflected in the exit polls. So I'm surprised that the figures are showing such close parity between the numbers for the BJP and the INC.
I mean, the poll of polls actually gives a range of seats to the BJP between 35 and 40, and to the Congress between 27 and 32. So it gives a slight edge to the BJP. But again, with the caveat that Gilles made, that in any sort of closely contested, narrow margin victories or defeats, that picture could change. So I'm just taking you through these poll surveys as they're coming in, and we'll keep updating them, as we get more surveys and more states. Now let's turn our attention to the big one, the one that really has the maximum impact on national elections, and that is Uttar Pradesh. Almost every poll is predicting that the BJP will retain Uttar Pradesh. Almost every poll is also predicting that Yogi Adityanath and the BJP's numbers will fall significantly. Significantly.
I followed your career and it's truly inspiring.
Sorry. सुधीर जी, आप कुछ इस पे बोलना चाहेंगे?
जी जरूर। देखिए, जिस समय चुनाव हो रहे थे उस समय भी मैंने लोगों से जो बातचीत होती थी तो ये चीज सामने निकल के आ रही थी कि उत्तर प्रदेश में 2017 में और अभी में आखिर क्या बदलाव आया है। 2017 में किन मुद्दों पे वोट दिए गए थे और 2019 में उनमें क्या चेंजेस आए। अगर हम चेंजेस की बात करें तो कुछ, जैसे कि हम बात करें कि कुछ खास जातियों की या कुछ खास संप्रदायों की, तो उनके अंदर एक बहुत जबरदस्त बेचैनी थी और बहुत ज्यादा एक तड़प जिसको कहते हैं कि वो थी कि हमें इस बार तो सरकार बनानी है। 2014 के बाद से जो उत्तर प्रदेश में बदलाव हुआ है, बीजेपी की ही सरकार बार बार आती है। बीजेपी की 2014 में आई, फिर 17, फिर 19 में लोकसभा में हुआ। तो इस बार बहुत बेचैनी थी और बहुत शोर था उनका कि और अगर आप चुनाव में अगर किसी भी विधानसभा में निकलेंगे और जाएंगे और देखेंगे तो लगेगा कि बीजेपी हारने जा रही है। मतलब वहां पर जो आवाजें आती थी या आप लोगों से मिलिए और बात करिए तो लगता था बहुत नाराजगी है। लेकिन एक बड़ा ही साइलेंट वोटर उत्तर प्रदेश में काम कर रहा था, वो था गरीब तबका, जिसको कई योजनाओं का जो फायदा मिला है। डायरेक्ट जो ट्रांसफर हुए हैं, जो कैश ट्रांसफर हुआ है और जो अनाज दिया जा रहा है, साथ में तेल दिया जा रहा है और इस तरह की जो चीजें दी गई, खासतौर से कोविड के दौरान में जब लोगों का काम धंधा बंद था, उस दौरान भी जो गरीब तबका था उसको ये सारी चीजें मिल रही थी। तो मुझे बार बार ये लग रहा था कि सरकार बनाने में तो बीजेपी को कोई दिक्कत नहीं आएगी, लेकिन हाँ सीटें जरूर बहुत ज्यादा कम होंगी, क्योंकि उसके भी कई कारण थे। उसका सबसे बड़ा कारण था गांव में जो जानवर खेत चल रहे थे,
जी
जो गायों को लेकर जो योगी आदित्यनाथ जी की जो नीतियां थी, उससे गायों की कटान तो रुकी, लेकिन उसका जो एक नुकसान हो रहा था वो कोई नियंत्रण नहीं था। और जो उन्होंने स्कीम्स लाए और जो गौशालाएं खोली, उसमें उतनी वो प्रभावी नहीं हो पा रही थी कि वो लोगों के खेतों को बचा पाए। और इनफैक्ट इनका जो अपना वोटर है वो भी बहुत इस बात से नाराज था। लेकिन जब इलेक्शन का टाइम आता है, जब वोटिंग का वक्त आता है, तो जैसे बेरोजगारी है एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है उत्तर प्रदेश में, महंगाई है एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है उत्तर प्रदेश में भी और बाकी देश में भी। लेकिन जब वोट देने व्यक्ति जाता है, तब उसको जो बीजेपी का जो यहाँ पर जिस तरह का प्रचार तंत्र है और जिस तरह उन्होंने बहुसंख्यकों की जो राजनीति की है और उसके हित की जो बातें की हैं, तो वो लोगों को ध्यान में आ जाती है और नाराजगी के बावजूद भी वोट बीजेपी को देते हैं। और एक चीज और है कि इस बार यूथ, जैसे एक फैमिली के अंदर मैंने देखा, कई जगहों पे हम बात करने गए, तो परिवार के अंदर अगर 5 वोट हैं, 6 वोट हैं, 4 वोट हैं, तो 2-3 वोट जो है ना वो खिलाफ में गए। मतलब अगर 3 वोटर बीजेपी के हैं तो 2 वोटर घर में ही जो यंगस्टर्स हैं या जो लड़कियां हैं, यंग लड़कियां हैं, उन्होंने बीजेपी के खिलाफ वोट दिया। तो उसका असर आ रहा है। 312 सीट्स थी, उसमें से सीटें जरूर कम होंगी, काफी सीटें कम होंगी, लेकिन सरकार इनकी लग रहा है ऐसा कि जो दिखा रहे हैं, जो इसमें आ रहा है
जहां
एग्जिट पोल में।
जहां जी, जहां तक ये पशु स्ट्रे कैटल की बात है, ये 2019 में भी बहुत सुनने को आया और उसका कोई इतना बड़ा असर नहीं पड़ा।
हाँ, लेकिन इस बार मतलब तब शायद 2 ही साल हुए थे, लेकिन अभी मुद्दा है बहुत बड़ा। देखिए, इसीलिए प्रधानमंत्री को उन्नाव की रैली में जब 3rd-4th फेज शुरू हुआ, तो खुद प्रधानमंत्री को उस पर आके बोलना पड़ा कि हम इसकी पॉलिसीज बना रहे हैं, हम इसके लिए नए इंतजाम करेंगे। और मुख्यमंत्री योगी आदित्यनाथ ने भी, मेरी भी उनसे बातचीत थी, उन्होंने भी ये बातें कही कि हम क्या क्या स्कीम्स लाने वाले हैं। ये सीरियस थ्रेट थी उनके लिए और वो बीजेपी इसको समझ रही थी और इसको काउंटर करने के लिए आरएसएस के स्तर पे और नीचे लेवल पे, बूथ स्तर पे बहुत काम हो रहा था। तो उसको उन लोगों ने लगता है कि कुछ हद तक मैनेज किया है, नाराजगी को मैनेज किया है, महंगाई को मैनेज किया है। और जो एक हिंदुत्व का कार्ड है भारतीय जनता पार्टी के पास, वो अभी भी उनका चल रहा है उत्तर प्रदेश में।
Hindutva card chal raha hai, and possibly cult of personality as well. A lot of people spoke also about improved law and order, लेकिन कहीं पे गुस्सा भी हुआ है, नहीं तो इतनी, if the polls are right, जो decline है, जो एक hit हुआ है, decline in the number of seats, वो शायद नहीं होती. Let's bring up the numbers as they're coming in from Uttar Pradesh. Okay, we have three surveys here, and Jill, I'd like you to make early comments, and I'm sure everybody, and Chandar, feel free if you want to comment on UP. This is what it actually looks like. No, I'm sorry, the C voter numbers are not in, but we do have the My Access numbers. So we have two surveys there, and wow. All right, guys, can we just come out of this, please? Can we come out of this? I just want to look at the My Access numbers. Can we go back to that? And while you update the C voter survey numbers and the Chanakya numbers, we did see there a clear prediction, Dilip, from the My Access poll for the BJP winning quite handsomely, actually. Gilles, any early thoughts? I know we need to get you more surveys, so we will.
Yes, because these numbers differ quite strikingly from the numbers I commented, less than an hour ago on a different channel.
Yeah.
And
Let us come out of this and
if I could
get
reserve, if I could reserve my comments.
So let's get an updated graphic on UP, and in the meantime, just get early impressions. सुधीर जी, आपने बहुत ट्रैवल किया उत्तर प्रदेश में, आपकी अपनी फीलिंग क्या है कि एक तरह से अगर मूड, क्या रीजन टू रीजन बदला, क्या कास्ट टू कास्ट बदला? अगर आप मैक्रो एनालिसिस करेंगे तो आप क्या कहेंगे?
देखिए, अगर आप फर्स्ट फेज से बात करें, सेकंड फेज से बात करें, तो फर्स्ट फेज और सेकंड फेज में बहुत स्ट्रांग मानी जा रही थी समाजवादी पार्टी और राष्ट्रीय लोकदल का गठबंधन। तो वहां, और वो दिख भी रहा था, जो जाट और मुस्लिम कॉम्बिनेशन है वो बहुत ही पावरफुल ढंग से वहां पर समाजवादी पार्टी और आरएलडी गठबंधन के साथ खड़ा हुआ नजर आ रहा था और मजबूती से खड़ा भी था। लेकिन वहां पे जो बीजेपी का काम था वो माइक्रो मैनेजमेंट उनका चल रहा था अदर ओबीसीज पे। तो जो दूसरी जो छोटी जातियां हैं वो उनको मोबिलाइज कर रहे थे। अब यही देखने वाली बात है, जब रिजल्ट आएगा तो अभी तो ये एग्जिट पोल है। और एग्जिट पोल के बारे में मैं एक बात जरूर कहना चाहूंगा कि जो पिछले 2017 में एग्जिट पोल हुए थे, किसी भी एग्जिट पोल में बीजेपी को 300 से ज्यादा नहीं दिए थे, और कोई भी एग्जिट पोल ऐसा नहीं था जिसने 75 से कम सीटें समाजवादी पार्टी को बताई हो। तो उस बार भी मतलब एक रुझान ही इससे पता चलता है, लेकिन कितना किसको मिल रहा है वो बहुत क्लियरिटी नहीं होती। लेकिन मैं अगर अपनी जो बताऊं, मैंने जो देखा, मुझे लड़ाई नजर आ रही थी खूब ठीक ठाक। मतलब ये नहीं था कि एक तरफा एसपीआरएलडी लीड कर रही हो, क्योंकि दूसरी तरफ भी लोग मोबिलाइज हो रहे थे। और एक जो दो बातें हैं जो पूरे उत्तर प्रदेश में कॉमन है, वो एक ये है कि एक फील ऑफ सिक्योरिटी है लोगों में। लोगों को लगता है कि कानून व्यवस्था पहले के मुकाबले बेहतर है। बड़े बड़े मसले जरूर हुए, हाथरस का कांड हुआ, बिकरू कांड हुआ, इस तरह के बड़े कांड कुछ जरूर हुए, लेकिन जो इन जनरल, जो नीचे ग्राउंड लेवल पे जो लोगों की अपनी फीलिंग थी, और जब लोग विकल्प के बारे में सोचते थे, मान लीजिए कि किसी हमें नाराजगी है, तो कोई जब लोगों से हम बात करते थे तो वो बोले कि भाई इनसे गुस्सा है तो हम देंगे किसको, अगर हम फलानी पार्टी को देंगे तो फिर गुंडों का राज हो जाएगा। तो वो इस तरह की बातें दिख रही थी कि लोगों में एक फील ऑफ सिक्योरिटी है योगी सरकार में। दूसरा एक पॉइंट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि वही जो मैंने पहले आपको बताया कि जो गरीबों का शुरू से लेकर आखिर तक जो लोग जिनके पास जमीनें नहीं है, जो हैंड टू माउथ है, और उनको जो अनाज और ये सारी चीजें मिल रही है, वो एक जाति और इवन कई जगहों पे रिलीजन को भी तोड़कर वो एक तरफा बीजेपी को वोट दे रहा है, क्योंकि उसको कभी मिला नहीं था कुछ, उसको अकाउंट में कभी
Yeah.
पैसा नहीं मिला था,
So,
उसको चीजें नहीं मिली थी।
मैं अपने प्रोड्यूसर से कह रही हूँ कि जो 3 सर्वेस के नंबर्स हमारे पास हैं वो हमें एक स्लाइड पे दिखाएं, so we are able to understand them a little more cogently. The zeros just meant that those surveys have not released their UP numbers yet. But Dilip, early impressions of UP. I mean, we did see Akhilesh and Jayant putting up a good fight. वो सुधीर जी भी कह रहे हैं that it's not as if this has been a walkover.
जी,
But it doesn't seem to have been able to travel the final mile. According to pollsters, I know Gilles is not convinced, so I'm going to show him that slide with at least 3 surveys. But your early thoughts, Dilip.
I only have one comment to make. When the slide begins, it is not easy to predict where the slide will take you. Um, it is this is one of the fundamental rules of election predicting and election trends. So yes, it is possible to claw on and hang on to your previous figures, but once you start sliding, it gets increasingly difficult as the numbers fall. So what you're seeing here is probably right, but it's not going to stop here. And I think Gilles is right in holding his comments for later. But I think that what Sudhirji talked about, the fact that it is a more equal fight as was sensed on the ground, is not coming through in the figures. इसीलिए मुझे थोड़ा सा हैरानी हो रहा है, because most people who traveled through the length and breadth of UP have come back saying कि कांटे का टक्कर है. But this is showing that there is a distinct, whether it's the fact that the subsidies and the benefits have reached the poor, whether it is the fact that the poor are not very often counted in many of the exit polls, whether it's the fact that castes are not taken into account substantially when these are played out. But keep in mind that UP could be as much of a surprise as Bengal was as far as pollsters go.
Interesting, and we're still waiting for those three surveys, a minimum of 3, and there'll be more that come in as the evening goes. PKD Nambiar, as we get the UP numbers up, any early forecast? A very interesting comment came from the Prime Minister in Pune, where he said that the government had successfully contained COVID and now was successfully managing the Ukraine crisis. If Yogi Adityanath does manage to retain UP without any huge, massive drop in numbers, it would mean that COVID was either not an electoral factor or that the BJP was able to do other things to offset the anger.
For that, I am yet to start reading your book because I bought one. After that, I will give a comment on that.
My book is not about politics at all. It's about people.
I got the book, but I could not start reading it.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward. One thing I'll tell you, Barka, I have visited.
Okay, Gilles, while PKD is making the point, here are 3 surveys for you to study. Go ahead, Mr. Nambiar. Yeah.
So I think I have traveled almost 60 to 65 odd assembly seats span Uttar Pradesh during the election, and even during the election and even before the election as a part of my professional assignments. One thing I'll tell you, after the Mayawati, I mean, if you really look at the 3 decades of UP politics, maybe after the Kalyan Singh and etc., there is only one leader who could command a huge amount of respect. Of course, there is a large number of detractors who would go absolutely against him. That is Yogi. After Mayawati, I have not seen a single leader. So while he may have a lot of detractors, but Yogi is truly have become a strong and one of the strongest brand in a political brand or an administrative brand in UP. You also need to appreciate the fact that 400 plus seats, assembly seats, 7 phases of an election. Can you imagine that hardly you would have not even able to hear, at least I have not seen in a single media, national media report, there is any kind of a violence during the election. Because you remember the old UP
Yeah,
Bihar
but look
election,
at these numbers, Mr. Nambiar. Mr. Nambiar, turn
But
your
look,
attention to
I'm
the
telling you,
numbers.
I'm coming to
Yeah.
this. No, I am saying from 312 or 310 seats, even if it comes down to a 30, 40, 50 seats, it may be a Western UP would have been little, as my other co-panelist was also telling, there was some kind of a shift, because that last time, if you recall, the Western UP completely was in with BJP. There may be some kind of a change may happen. But I must compliment Akhilesh Yadav. I don't know, 4 years he was not even really visible, but he kept all his energy stored for, and he put up a real good fight. And I would say that it was because more of like a bipolar political activity, Yogi versus Akhilesh. And even if he is, but I think BJP coming back, any government coming back, even if it is a less margin, that itself is a very big barka. Let's accept that there may be some kind of an anti-incumbency will definitely be there against any government. Even in Narendra Modi was in Gujarat, there was definitely the number of seats coming down in one or two elections.
Can we just turn our attention to these numbers just for a second? And as has been pointed out, there are many pollsters. There will be many more surveys that are coming in, and we'll wait a while to do a poll on UP because it's a big one, and there are certain surveys that haven't outed their numbers yet. But Gilles, first impressions. Now, you said that an hour ago it seemed very different. We do have 3 significant pollsters on the screen now, and they all basically say the same thing, which is that the BJP is going to keep UP.
Yeah, so as of now, there's not a single exit poll that announces or predicts a defeat for the BJP. So in that sense, there is a consensus. But look at the range, right? I've seen 7 or 8, maybe 9 exit polls as of now, and the India Today My Axis poll seems to be clearly an outlier because everyone else is in that range of 210 to 20 to 250 to 60. Right. According to India Today My Axis, the BJP might actually improve on its 2017 performance, which seems, a tall claim or a tall prediction.
Yeah, I mean, 326 would make it more than the 312 of last time, and it just seems like, in this case, it's the India Today My Axis poll that's the outlier. You're absolutely right for UP.
Yeah, and the NDA really means the BJP because none of the BJP's partner is going to gain. I mean, they don't have a lot of. They're not contesting that many seats, and it's really about the BJP. So even if you account for that, you can remove a few seats here and there, but still, the range is enormous. Keeping in mind India Today as an outlier, the consensus seems to show that the BJP is losing ground in UP. Now, obviously, if exit polls cannot tell you what the results are going to be, by definition, it cannot explain, what they are, what they are showing or what they are indicating. So at this stage, it is literally impossible to say which are the factors, pulling, which are the factors pushing, whether, Hindutva did compensate for the lack of economic performance or unemployment. It's absolutely too early to make, any such claims. But it seems to me that despite what those numbers are showing, it seems likely that the election is more open than we think, and
That's interesting. That's
I would
interesting.
expect the gap to
Explain.
reduce.
Yeah, 1 minute. Can you explain why you think, despite this unanimity in the pattern, and the pattern is just that the
Yeah.
BJP will retain UP, you think, and so does Dilip clearly, that this could indicate that there still might be a surprise here, according to you?
So for me, the surprise would be a lower range, a lower majority for the BJP. I mean, it would still need significant shift in vote share in order to, change the result. And from the very beginning in this election, I've been saying that a fragmented opposition landscape plays, in favor of the BJP. But the BJP at 210 or 220 is very different. It's a very different story than the BJP at 300, right? And would actually show that even in a state like UP, where the BJP he's accumulating so many advantages, they can still be challenged. And if you keep the 2024 election in mind, the opposition does not need to win it. They only need, maybe 2,000 seats in order to affect the BJP's majority at the center. And so it keeps the outcome will tell us, to what extent,
Yeah,
UP remains open.
and Sudhir ji, aap aana cha rahe the, and then Dilip. And like I said, please, everyone, please just indicate to me. Chandar, don't feel you need to be confined to Punjab. In the next half hour, we'll actually discuss national politics. So I'm sure all of you will have something to say. Sudhir ji, ये जब आप आंकड़े देखते हैं, जिल बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं कि एक तरफ तो 326 का जो आउटलायर फिगर है, वो तो सजेस्ट कर रहा है that योगी will outperform himself from last time, which was a landslide victory, which intuitively doesn't seem correct. मतलब instinct के level पे ठीक नहीं लगती है. पर बाकी जो आप average numbers देख रहे हैं, उसमें भी निकल के आता है कि कितना drop होगा could decide whether this is a weakened Yogi, a weakened BJP, or does that not matter?
देखिए, मुझे लगता है कि अगर आप 1989 से 1989 से और अब तक के चुनावों को देखें, तो उस 1989 के बाद एनडी तिवारी थे, उसके बाद में बीच में एक साल के लिए 1 साल 1.5 साल तक राजनाथ सिंह और रामप्रकाश गुप्ता 2 अपर कास्ट के सीएम बने थे। वो भी मतलब 6 महीने 8 महीने मुश्किल से। उसके बजाय नहीं तो फिर ज्यादातर बैकवर्ड और दलित चीफ मिनिस्टर ही बने। ये पहला मौका है 2017 से अब तक कि एक अपर कास्ट के सीएम 5 साल रहे हैं। और उत्तर प्रदेश का एक रिकॉर्ड है। मैंने उस दिन योगी आदित्यनाथ जी से पूछा भी था कि आप बहुत मिथ तोड़ते रहते हैं, आप नोएडा भी जाते हैं और आप बिजनौर भी जाते हैं जहां कोई सीएम जाता नहीं है, कि माना जाता है कि वहां जो जाता है वो हार जाता है, अगला जीतता नहीं है। तो क्या आप ये मिथ तोड़ पाएंगे कि अगला चुनाव जो आप फिर लगातार जीत पाएंगे? क्योंकि कोई भी सीएम अगली बार लगातार सीएम होता नहीं है। तो उन्होंने कहा था मैं मिथ तोड़ने के लिए ही आया हूं। अब अगर ये जो फिगर्स दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं 222 से लेकर और 326 तक, अगर सिंपल मेजॉरिटी में भी अगर योगी आदित्यनाथ जीत के आ जा रहे हैं और दोबारा लगातार सीएम बन रहे हैं, तो ये उनका क्रेडिट माना जाएगा, क्योंकि पिछला इलेक्शन योगी आदित्यनाथ के फेस पे नहीं हुआ था। इस बार का चुनाव योगी आदित्यनाथ के फेस पे हुआ है।
ये आपने बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग चीज रेज की है। मिस्टर नाम्बियर हैज टू गो, सो आई विल गेट अ लास्ट कमेंट फ्रॉम हिम ऑन दिस, और इस बात पे हम दोबारा आते हैं that will this be Yogi's win or Modi's win? क्योंकि जो पिछला चुनाव, जैसे सुधीर जी ने बहुत perceptively बोला, वो योगी जी तो कहीं डोमेन में ही नहीं थे. He was a surprise appointment as chief minister. So PKD, will, if these numbers are correct, will it be Yogi Adityanath's win?
So it will be a collective win, because
that's a politically correct answer. What do you think as an analyst?
No, I think see, I'll tell you, there is, as I was telling you earlier, Yogi has become truly a household name and a strong political brand in UP and across the country, but in UP specifically. Second thing which I wanted to tell you, I mean, I'm sure that some of other panelists can also really correct if I'm wrong. There is a huge shift in UP politics. The UP politics was completely, over the last, at least in the last 15 years of which I have been following, all about caste, the Bhumikar, Brahmin, Dalit, or Dalit maybe further subdivisions, Thakurs. This is the way we used to divide, and in the minority community. Within the minority also, there are some pockets where there is Shia. or in Awadh region will vote like this way, or in the western UP will vote like this way. Purvanchal to alag hi duniya hai. This is the way we used to really do this. Can you imagine that this time around the vote of or the discussions about the voting has been changed to a great extent. Of course, the people like you and me who are sitting on the studios will still talk about there is a polarization of votes in different level and etc.
But we don't know right now, right?
I would say that
there is
a Hindu consolidation of vote. There is no doubt. The Hindus have now earlier. You asked me as an analyst. I'm just telling you. Earlier, we used to talk about a Mayavadi, who holds some amount of the Hindu votes as a OBCs. The Yadavs used to be with Netaji, or this is the way it used to be divided.
So
the upper caste, the Brahmins used to be as a BJP.
You're arguing that there has been a kind of transcendence of votes to the Hindu identity is what
Hindu identity. There is no doubt Hindu consolidation is taking place, which is, I'm not saying that I'm not for a Hindu consolidation of vote. I'm not for any kind of a consolidation. But one good part is that we have stopped the micro dividing of caste, subcaste is being going away from that credit goes to Yogi.
Okay, thank you, PKD. I know you have to go, and I want Dilip to come in with his impressions of UP. We also have other guests joining this wheel. Go ahead, Dilip.
My take is that what PKD said about a consolidation of the Hindu vote is right, except that this time you've had the farmer factor as a very substantial factor. And you've also seen that the caste factor has been so dominant as far as the seat allocations were concerned. All the battles you heard about, all the talk that you heard about was about how they were slicing and dicing the caste pie to make sure that they could put the right names and the right caste against a caste in the opposition or in the ruling party. So I would say that to indicate that there has been a subsuming of that in this vast support base for Yogi is incorrect. What is not being analyzed enough is the extent to which women's safety and the kind of goodies which have come to the household have translated into votes.
Very important point, Dilip, because last time it was the gas. No, I'm actually not interrupting you, just interjecting briefly to say last time it was the gas cylinder, the bathroom that women in UP spoke a lot about. This time, let's not forget the free rations. I don't know that we have focused enough on the free rations, but go ahead.
But the free ration thing needs to be juxtaposed against the abysmal incapability to produce any jobs. So, between the mother of the household and the young person in the household who's looking at her or his own future, there seems to be a kind of contradiction, which I think Sudhirji had pointed out already. So you are seeing that kind of a divide happening, and forward-looking people, I don't mean the caste sense, forward-looking people who are expecting the future rather than a future of freebies are going to be concerned and definitely not part of this bargain of consolidation under one flag.
Okay. We have our other guests also joining us now. Aarti Jairat, Sandeep Ghosh, Kartikeya Batra are with us. Sudhir ji, before you go, agar aap Uttar Pradesh par kuch bolna chahe aakhir mein, we have more service coming in and these two lean the same way. Sabhi ka ek hi natija hai ki BJP Uttar Pradesh ko retain karega. Sudhir ji?
मुझे यही कहना है कि अगर ये जो रुझान आ रहे हैं और अगर ये वाकई में सही है तो इसमें एक बड़ा योगदान मुख्यमंत्री योगी आदित्यनाथ का जरूर होगा। जिस तरह से उन्होंने काम किया है वो एक राजनेता की तरह नहीं किया। जिस तरह की आक्रामकता उन्होंने मुख्तार अंसारी, अतीक अहमद और दूसरे माफिया हैं उनको लेकर जो दिखाई है, जिस तरह से लोगों के घर गिरवाए, वो एक पॉलिटिशियन उस तरह से, नॉर्मल पॉलिटिशियन उस तरह से काम नहीं करता। और लोग खुद भी, ये लोगों के अंदर एक डर होता है कि अगर हमारी सरकार नहीं रही तो फिर मेरे साथ क्या होगा। लेकिन वो रुके नहीं और लगातार इस तरह की एक एग्रेशन दिखाते रहे, जिसका लोगों में, जो आम लोग हैं उनमें एक ये था कि हाँ भाई, अगर कोई नहीं कर सकता लेकिन योगी कर सकते हैं, योगी ऐसा कर सकते हैं। तो ये जो एक ये अगर वो वापस आते हैं तो उसमें ये बड़ा कारण होगा।
Okay, Sudhirji, thank you. Namaste, and we'll keep our programming going. Let's come out of this now and take a look at the macro picture. Let's spend the next 30 odd minutes looking at what this means for national politics, and if we can start with the big picture for our members of our audience who are just tuning in. The exit polls are forecasting a landslide sweep for the Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab and a second term for Yogi Adityanath and the BJP in Uttar Pradesh. Neck and neck battles in Goa and Uttarakhand, and a forecast for the BJP to take Manipur. What does this say for politics nationally? What does this say for the brand Yogi? Will he now be a power to reckon with within the BJP? Many interesting questions coming up, and we will take a look at those numbers once again. As I said, we've got Sandeep, Aarti, and Kartikeya joining us. Let me first bring up Punjab for the benefit of the audience that's just joining in. And Aarti, let me get your first comments on what we know so far with the health warning that these are, of course, exit polls and not the actual results. Aarti, go ahead.
Yes, they may not be the actual results, but Barkha, I think they pretty much match ground reports that were coming from Punjab. And the Punjab result is a complete self goal by the Congress, a complete self goal. I mean, the way they fought with the kind of infighting, the sort of dissensions, Sidhu versus Amrinder Singh first, and then Sidhu versus Channi next. And I think that they just shot themselves in the foot. And people in Punjab just wanted a change, and they're ready to risk it with Aam Aadmi Party. Last time, Aam Aadmi Party was a very strong contender, but unfortunately did not make it. This time, the people of Punjab have said, "What the hell? Let's give them a chance." It's pretty much like what happened in Delhi, if you remember, in 2013. Aam Aadmi Party, kind of. It was a fractured mandate, and Aam Aadmi Party formed a government, but with the Congress. And then, in 2015, Aam Aadmi Party won that landslide victory in Delhi. And that's because the people of Delhi were fed up with both the BJP and the Congress. And I think that, this is what the people of Punjab have said. They're fed up of the two parties, that have ruled Punjab for the last so many decades, Akalis and Congress, and they're ready to take their chances with a new force. So I'm not surprised that the Aam Aadmi Party is winning with this kind of landslide. What will be interesting is to see how Kejriwal manages, this whole leadership question. I mean, he is the face of the Aam Aadmi Party, but there is going to be a full-fledged chief minister in Punjab, in Bhagwant Singh Mann, who will have more powers than Kejriwal has in Delhi as Delhi chief minister. And that will be interesting to see, how does this leadership thing play out in Aam Aadmi Party?
Okay, let me actually get Chandar there before I get Sandeep and Kartikeya to come in, because you have at one point considered politics, you knew Kejriwal really well. Where do you think he will move from here? Let's assume that these figures on our screen are correct. Kejriwal is easily able to form the government. Bhagwant Mann is the chief minister. Do you see Arvind Kejriwal micromanaging, remote controlling the state? And when we asked people in Punjab this, they said, we don't care. We actually want the Delhi model. Sorry, you're on mute, Chandra. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think, I mean, I agree with it completely. I don't think the people of Punjab have a problem with Kejriwal remote controlling the Bhagwant Singh Mann government if and when it forms. In fact, this is something which they even, this was the signals which they were getting from the people, and they were also giving to the people that, listen, we are going to bring our Delhi model of government, and this is what we're going to do. And I mean, even if you look at the AAP leadership in Punjab, there really isn't a very great Punjab leadership. Even during the election campaign, you found that it was the Delhi leaders who were crisscrossing the state and holding rallies. It was Arvind Kejriwal, it was Raghav Chadda, Manish Sisodia, and the only Punjab leader who you could see moving around the state, that was Bhagwant Mann, and that also after his name was announced as the chief ministerial candidate. And apart from that, you have to strain to remember the names of any other significant Punjab leader. So we are going to see the same thing play out if and when the government is formed. And Arvind Kejriwal will certainly remote control. He might even, give one of his trusted Delhi lieutenants a position in Punjab,
Yeah.
which is very likely.
I mean, the
And
rumor is that Raghav Chadda could become
yeah,
deputy chief minister, and that's
deputy,
obviously
absolutely.
what
Yeah,
you're referring to. All right,
correct.
early comments from Sandeep and Kartikeya. Sandeep, go ahead. A lot of Modi supporters like yourself, and notice I said Modi and not BJP supporters. Uh, Almost everybody who backs the right wing would rather have the Congress or the Akalis than Kejriwal in Punjab. And Kejriwal was able to present it as an AAP versus the rest battle. It seems to have worked for him if these numbers are correct.
Barkha, one point I don't know whether you discussed and whether you have it. You must see the regional distribution within Punjab.
Hmm.
AAP has scored entirely, it swept Malwa. Whereas if you see northern Punjab, there it is kind of just neck to neck with Congress and SAD. Okay, so it's a very, very clear split between the north and the south. This is a point I don't know needs to be seen. I'm
Yeah.
saying with reference to one exit poll which I have access to. But I think this is a very, very significant observation. So when we are talking about AAP sweep, we have to take it with a certain. Certainly, they will come with an absolute majority, and therefore they will rule the state. That's not it. But there are certain dynamics at play. I think this winning Malwa will also have a fallout or beneficial fallout in Haryana and other places when Kejriwal goes forward
Yeah.
afterwards.
Okay,
Uh,
Karthik. Sorry. I thought you finished. Complete your point, Sandeep. Yeah.
no, quickly is basically, a lot of people, not because they were followers of Modi or Congress, didn't want Kejriwal. There are certain reservations about Kejriwal, which a lot of people have expressed. One is his image, and there are certain views of other people, about his how stable he is and his views on certain matters. So that's why I think everybody had a reservation, whether it's Amrita Singh or even Congress people. So that's a separate story. I don't think it's
Okay,
really.
we'll get into the larger macro politics in a moment from now. Karthik, if you want to come in.
Punjab in this league of three states, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Goa, where this time I saw a very palpable anti-establishment mood. It wasn't so much an anti-government mood of the present day. It was an anti-establishment mood or towards a bipolar polity, and they were looking for alternatives. It seems that in Punjab it has materialized. Uttarakhand and Goa, not so much. But I think one thing you have to sort of give credit to Aam Aadmi Party is that it seems that after the Gujarat model, the next model that's relevant in India is a Delhi model. And somewhere I think the Congress has lost the governance narrative. It has ceded that space. First, they ceded it to the BJP, and now even Aam Aadmi Party has taken over the governance narrative in its own hands. And that's one of the reasons why they've been able to beat Punjab. The other thing I want to sort of bring to your notice, Barkha, is that so far we were used to seeing the Congress getting beaten by BJP in state after state. But in the last two rounds, it has been the non-BJP parties, the left in Kerala, and now Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab, that is beating the Congress. So this is another reason to worry for the Congress in terms of its winnability
Let,
across states.
let me let me.
Yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying last point that Mr. Ghosh made, that it was expected that the Aam Aadmi Party will do better in Malwa because in Doaba, the eastern part of North Punjab, there's a very high Dalit population concentration, and you would expect the Congress to do well because of Mr. Channi. And in the western part of northern Punjab, which is the Majha region, that's called the Panthik belt, where the Shiromani Akali Dal is traditionally strong. So the Aam Aadmi Party doing well in Malwa was expected, and that's where most of the seats are coming from, if this is true.
Okay, I want to actually spend a little bit of time looking at the macro political trends that are emerging from these numbers, if we take them to be kosher for now with all the health warnings. Dilip, yes, Goa and Uttarakhand are close, but if it ends up being a kind of zero score for the Congress, what might that mean for how the party will look at it?
That will be a disaster for the party. I think that there's no doubt that the Congress will have to call it soul searching, but there's going to be hell to pay within the party on two counts. One, don't forget that the party has announced and is likely to have to complete its internal elections in the next few months. And the second thing is that hopes were held high both on Punjab as well as on the smaller states of Goa, as well as in Uttarakhand. So there will be a whole bunch of the so-called Rajiv Brigade who will have to account for what happened in these states. The reason I've said Rahul Brigade, because the reason I've said Rahul Brigade is because, in a sense, Uttar Pradesh has been the main stomping ground for Priyanka Gandhi. And though there are people who will say that, she had a role in bringing in Sidhu into this position, etc., the fact is that Rahul's people have been handling a large part of the heavy lifting as far as Punjab, Uttarakhand, and Goa are concerned. So I think there's going to be a churn there, and Rahul will either have to reconfigure his team or replace members of them. And so I see a huge churn happening there.
You see a churn happening, but you seem to confine it to Rahul and his team, and therefore not the Gandhis themselves. And we'll delve into that a little bit more as we look and turn our attention back to Uttar Pradesh. And I'm wondering if I'm able to draw Gilles out a little bit more. This is what the exit polls are telling us now, Gilles. You've seen these slides, but just for the benefit of our panelists who've just joined us or audience members who've just joined us, these are three surveys, and I think we have a few more now that we can tag on. And as you pointed out, there's one outlier poll. Just hold that there, guys. Let's see the other two as well. Yeah. So almost everybody except today's Chanakya and the Axis poll, if we can go back to the first slide now, are actually looking to a BJP victory in UP, but with significant drop in numbers. Aarti, any thoughts here before I get Jill to take us through the numbers?
Well, Barkha, I mean, if we go by past performance, my Axis and Chanakya, although, you're calling them outlier polls.
No, outliers today. I only
Absolutely,
meant
but they
that
have
only
been
today.
reasonably, reasonably accurate, through the years, and every time they are the ones who have predicted, these what seem to be impossible numbers, and they've turned out to be correct. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the BJP actually scores this stupendous victory and in UP, almost a repeat of what they did last time. And I think that, there are many, many factors that go into this thing. And, one important factor is this whole thing of a strong ruler. Yogi Adityanath, for all his faults, he may not have handled COVID well. He, maybe, sort of a Thakurvad and whatever. But the fact is that he is seen as a strong leader. And I think that really attracts voters. And if you soften that with this free ration scheme and gas cylinders and housing and so on, I mean, it's an unbeatable commodity to sell in an election. And of course, there is that very strong Hindu sentiment which Yogi Adityanath represents. In fact, Yogi Adityanath has started representing that Hindu sentiment even more than Modi. And, I mean, it's a very potent combination in UP. So I really wouldn't be surprised if the two outlier polls today turn out to be correct when the numbers finally come in.
I just want to clarify that when I said outlier, I meant that they're the only ones deviating slightly from the pattern of the other polls or the ranges being
Yes.
offered by the other polls. Before Gilles actually takes us through these numbers, Sandeep, Dilip, Karthikeya, if any of you want to add thoughts here on what this might mean for the power dynamics within the BJP. While the BJP can summarily replace chief ministers in other states, Yogi, who was a surprise appointment after 2017, has emerged, as Aarti said, as a brand of his own, one who can't necessarily be directed from Delhi. I'm just wondering what that does to the power dynamics. And in the meantime, we have the poll of polls for UP and aggregation of those 5 surveys on our screen. But go ahead, Sandeep.
First of all, I've been saying all through Yogi in UP when the elections were going, he was a bit like Modi in Gujarat, and that is what was working in his favor. Modi, of course, was a 3 term, and his was a 1 term, and so a lot of people in UP were seeing him as a future. Rightly or wrongly, we can, in our judgment, dismiss his prospects in the long run, but a lot of people have been seeing him in the Modi mold going forward in BJP. And that's why he has, I think, garnered a lot of. I personally feel that Yogi is also sensible. He would know that for the next leap forward, he will have to deliver in the next 5 years, just like Modi, become sort of an automatic choice if he has to go to Delhi. So I don't think he is going to lock horns too much with the center. Modi himself, you will find, is on a different, mode going forward. Next 2 years, I've written an article in the morning whether saying that whether he wins or loses, next 2 years is going to be a major challenge for him on the economic front, on the global front, everywhere. And I think he will have to focus on that to deliver 2024. So I don't really see too much of a power dynamics tussle between.
Dilip, do you agree? And I guess, Sandeep, it would all come down to what the actual range of victory or defeat is. But then, of course, a winner is a winner, and do the margins matter? Does how much the BJP comes down by, if it comes down, and
Yeah.
at all? Does it matter? Will it matter? Dilip, can I bring you in?
Just before Dilip comes in, Dilip,
Sorry.
1 second. I said, it's like the 180 club. That was the kind of speculation which were happening earlier. Now, as you said, if Yogi wins, he wins. I don't think your Keshav Prasad Maurya or anybody else will be in any position to challenge him just now, even if it's 250 or 220 for that matter.
Okay, sorry, Dilip, go
I
ahead.
tend to agree here. I think I tend to agree with that the next 2 years, Prime Minister Modi has his task pretty much cut out for him. Locking horns in UP is not going to be a priority. If anybody does lock horns, it's not going to be Modi. And there may be locked horns, but that's not going to be from Mr. Modi. Second, what you're seeing here is a situation which will allow Yogi to focus on UP alone. One, because he will have to, if the numbers fall from where it is, from the 300 plus to the 250 plus range. So that is a significant change for Yogi, and he will have to correlate what governance means with what people expect, and also have to listen to some of his legislators, which has been the primary problem that he has been facing going into this election. As far as Mr. Modi is concerned, he's really going to have the economy and global politics to worry about.
Okay. Akhilesh Yadav is, of course, not buying into these exit polls and saying that he will form the government. Every politician believes what they want to from exit polls, but there's also been some of our panelists who feel or remind us that the Bengal exit polls went wrong. So exit polls are only exit polls. Can we take the earlier slide and go through these 5 surveys now with?
Barkha, I thought.
Okay. Yeah, once again, Karthik.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
just ask Jill and then I'll come to you. Jill, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we see from these numbers is that, you do have 2 exit polls predicting a massive win for the BJP against the others who predict a loss of seats quite significant. And I just looked at the 2017 number to rebound on what RT Jerat was saying earlier. Chanakya in 2017 was closer to the mark, but India Today was below by almost 130 seats in terms of prediction. So even among these two, it's 50-50, in terms of, accuracy record. Once again, we have to be extremely careful about these numbers. because it's not just that you have a number of exit polls conducted simultaneously by various companies, but it's also experience from the ground that shows that voters are very often reluctant to respond. And what makes those results, going away so much from one another is that the variations in who chooses to respond or not completely throws the random sampling that they are doing, and so that accounts, for these variations. Once again, I would not be surprised if in 3 days we see that the BJP is at a much lower number than some of the more optimistic, shall we say, exit polls are indicating here. But again, all caveats
Yeah.
really apply.
I mean, the fact is that the vote exit polls are based on a simple mechanism,
Yeah.
which is the same mechanism that journalists follow. Who did you vote for? You have to ask people, who did you vote for? And people
Yeah.
don't always tell you the truth. Sometimes they deliberately, knowingly mislead you. And with all of those caveats, Aarti, if you want to come in on this, on national politics, a possible Congress wipeout, churn within the Congress, churn within the BJP, if any. Your thoughts? And then Kartiki, I'll come to you. Yeah.
Barkha, I mean, we have to look ahead at 2024, right? Because that's the really big election that's coming up. Now, where does a Congress fit in this picture that will emerge in 2024? Is it relevant at all, in opposition alliance? Yes, I mean, look, for instance, in Goa and Uttarakhand, although it may not win these states, but it is still the second party in both these states. And, say TMC, which tried to make an entry in Goa, Aam Aadmi Party, which tried to make an entry in Goa, both failed. The Congress still is there. So, I think this is really the big predicament for the opposition, that when they sit together to decide, the shape of the alliance to take on the BJP in 2024, where do they fit the Congress into this whole puzzle? What kind of a role will it play? What sort of relevance will it have? How many seats? Because if you look at 2019, there are about 170, 180 seats in which, it was a direct contest between the BJP and the Congress, right? Although the TMC was hoping that it would become the new Congress and, kind of take over from the Congress, I think that seems to be a little far-fetched. It's a real pipe dream because, there are internal problems in the TMC, and its performance in Goa has not really been, up to scratch. So this is really the big question before the opposition, that, it's always been assumed that the Congress is the only national party and therefore the only real national challenger to the BJP. But the way the Congress is losing election after election after election after election, it seems to be shrinking and diminishing. So, can it really be the pivot of an opposition alliance? I don't know. And if there is no pivot of an opposition alliance, then it may make things much easier for Modi and the BJP in 2024.
Yeah, and Gilles was earlier making the point that it may not all be over for Mamta, but we will come back to that. Kartiki, I'll just bring you in, and then let's step back and look at the politics. Go ahead, Kartiki.
I think, Barkha, 2 points. One was that, one of the outlier polls that you mentioned, and I got what you were trying to say.
Oh my God, I have to really clarify what I mean by
no.
this. You're all after my
No,
life
I
for
think,
calling.
but that will tie into
all
what
I
I'm going to
mean,
say.
all I
No,
mean, I'm underlining again, and Axis is a poll that's taken very, very seriously by all of us. Pradeep Gupta is an excellent pollster. All I mean is that today he stands in a corner where everybody else is saying hit to BJP, but they'll retain UP. He's saying a massive win. That's all I mean by
And
outlier.
I'm
But go
going
ahead.
to support that. That's why I was saying that you are right in the sense that if you just go by one data point, phase one, which is
Yeah.
when the Samajwadi Party and the RLD combined, their might was on test and they were supposed to do well in the 58 seats. The Axis poll is giving the BJP 49 out of 58 seats in that belt. If that is indeed the case, or even if it's thereabouts, then this whole farmer agitation business has nothing to do with these elections.
Yeah.
So, is that true? Because if that is true, then we've been on very different pages all this while. Because at least we thought, conventional wisdom suggested that at least in the first phase, because of the farmer agitation and the alliance with RLD, the Samajwadi Party will, if not anything, make it 60-40 in their favor. This is big, right?
Well, maybe we, and here by we I mean the media, overemphasize the anger among Jats, because the Jats demographically did not actually add up to that large group in the state. Dilip, let's bring you in, and after that,
But
we do also.
sorry, can I also add something about national politics, if you may give me a minute?
Yeah, can I just get
Sure,
can I get Dilip, and then you can come back on the larger picture. Dilip, go ahead. Dilip, your closing thoughts. You're on mute.
Yeah. Am I on mute? Okay.
No, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So my sense is that farmer agitation is a substantial poll swinger. That's one. Two, I go with the idea that these polls, as far as UP are concerned, have probably been done also in a kind of patchwork, and I'm not so confident about what results the pollsters have come up with. Three, my sense is that it's going to be a closer fight than is being portrayed at the moment. Four, like you said at the beginning, and like we said 4 times in the middle, let's wait for the 10th.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough. Dilip, we let you go. I know you have to go. And let's, Gilles, I want to bring you in on something you mentioned, the turnout. And Chandar also mentioned this. In Punjab, it's particularly interesting. It significantly dropped from the last election. And Chandar was suggesting that the people who did not show up to vote were disenchanted Congress voters. And we'll get more on that. But Gilles, if you want to come in on what the turnout is suggesting.
We see is that across most states, except Manipur, which we haven't mentioned as yet.
No, we have the Manipur slide. Can we please bring it up?
Good.
And we of course have the Manipur slide. Please let's bring it up.
Thank you. So across all states except Manipur, it seems that turnout has diminished. In Punjab, it seems to be particularly strong at -6%, which is quite significant because you have to go back to the 90s to see that kind of turnout. So it is quite significant. And it's a good reminder that sweeping elections may not necessarily mean wave elections, right? In 2007, Mayawati wins a single majority for the first time in 35 years in UP, but with the lowest turnout ever recorded in that state at 46%. And so a depression of turnout can actually convert into sweeping victories, but which may not amount to wave elections.
That's such an interesting point. Chandar, do you want to add to that? Because you did, make a reference to disgruntled Congress ministers, disgruntled Congress voters.
Yes. We are not looking, we haven't discussed this as yet, that if the Congress does as badly as these numbers are projecting, what will happen to the party? Because if I just look at Punjab and what's happening here, I can clearly see that a lot of senior leaders will desert. They might go and join other parties. Already we've seen, Amrinder Singh and his little gang have broken away. That was one. But I can see many more disgruntled leaders sitting on the fence and who are making anti-party statements, doing anti-party activities. And I think they're just waiting to see which way the results come out before they take their, make a decision.
But these people who did not vote, Chandar, according to you, who were they? The 6% drop was who?
If you look at who's lost the vote, it's the Congress votes which have reduced the most, almost 10% drop in the Congress votes. So we can assume, and I mean, even the Akali vote has slipped a little if you go by these figures, which was not reflected on the ground, because when we were looking at what was happening, it seemed as if the Akali Dal would do better than last time when it got about 15 seats. And it had more or less retained its vote bank of about 26 to 28%. But if it slips below that, then there is trouble also for the Akalis, because then they're looking at a very, very dark future ahead of them. But to come back to the Congress And what's going to happen at the national level? I mean, you were discussing who will come into the opposition space, which might get vacated by the Congress. So obviously, the Aam Aadmi Party is raring to fill that space. Whether it
Yeah.
would be allowed to, because the Aam Aadmi Party, as we all know, is a disruptor of sorts. All the other parties do gang up when it comes to this particular party. And in Punjab, of course, we've seen this so many times. And if it tries to get into the Congress space as the main opposition party, I think there will be a major churn even at the national level. How it plays out, how the BJP tries to contain the Aam Aadmi Party, it will be interesting to see that.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because there's also some sense that, some whispers, as it were, of Kejriwal and the BJP having reached some sort of better understanding, at least in terms of the Delhi center equation than earlier. Kartike, you wanted to add something, and then we'll take last comments on the politics. Kartike, go ahead on the turnout.
No, I was just saying, Barkha, that I think a hidden story beneath the aggregate number that you mentioned, 6%, is the regional variation in the drop of the turnout in Punjab. And if you look at the provisional figures that were put out, so if you draw a map of it, you'll see that the lowest level of turnout, which means that the voting pattern was the most optimistic in the Malwa area, which is where the Aam Aadmi Party has its stronghold. If you go up to the Doaba area, which is where the scheduled caste population is concentrated, which is where the Congress would have expected to make big inroads, although the number of seats there are fewer, that's where a large chunk of the drop came from. So it seems like whether it was Congress supporters who became disgruntled or they were just confused. Last time, a lot of the Hindu voters had voted for the Congress because the BJP at the last moment, the RSS had supported Amrinder Singh. So it could be anything, but I think that the regional variation is also very important. That probably could explain as to why the Congress is not doing that well.
Okay, let's keep looking at the slides. Let's go through all five states and get last comments on the big political message. I'll start with you, Sandeep. Yes, you're right to quote the 180 club. And even now, if the BJP doesn't win handsomely, as two of the polls are suggesting, and actually takes a knock of, let's say, 60 to 80 to maybe even more seats, but still retains the state, does that change anything in the story?
I wouldn't think so, Barkha. I don't think BJP can really rock the boat in UP as long as Yogi wins. They would not try to do that. There is too much at stake. They'll have to deliver Lok Sabha, as I told you, and Yogi will have to deliver the Lok Sabha if he wants to have a hope going 2024 forward. So I don't think UP. And Aarti was talking about the two polls where I would pin more hope, not hope, faith in a sense. I tweeted about it also yesterday. Uh, Yogi continuously saying that he is going to have more than 300 seats. And in all his interviews yesterday, and I don't think a politician of that kind will be hammering in this fact so hard if he didn't have some confidence, because it's not just a question of credibility with the public. We know politicians can take a lot of egg on their face, though Yogi, I'm not sure whether he eats eggs or not. But within the party, if Yogi goes on saying I'll get 300 plus and he scores much below, I think he'll have a credibility issue in the party. So I'm personally, while it's entirely possible, I think the scores would improve. And even if they don't improve, I don't think BJP is going to mess around with him just now. And, there's also this whole perception, a lot of things you were saying earlier about outside journalists, and I've said this, Barkha, in your shows much, much earlier. We look at a certain way how a pandemic has been handled. The people within have a different view. It's just like you're having a crisis at home. And if there is somebody within the family trying their best, even though that best may not be enough, some people give him that credit. People had not, again, some 6, 8 months ago, I have talked about the law and order situation with you from my personal experience. It's not a question of one or two. I think that's where not only journalists, but even Akhilesh Yadav, I think, faltered in trying to deride him on the claims of.
Well, I would respond to that by saying that if Akhilesh Yadav had been very visible during the pandemic, it might have been a different narrative. But because he came in the last mile and spoke about the handling of the pandemic, perhaps it didn't have that kind of resonance. I don't know. We need the results
No,
to
yeah,
actually
yeah,
analyze.
there's a
Yeah,
pandemic is one story, Barkha, but pandemic, Akhilesh Yadav got a lot of things wrong. His anti-vaxxer thing in pandemic, it weakened his case. I personally feel he could have spoken a lot more on development and a positive note on what he did during his stint, rather than saying that, I laid the foundation stone here. Even on law and order, if you recall, Barkha, he was the guy who set up this 100 dial system towards
yeah.
the end of his period. He could have taken those things on positively rather than trying to
Okay.
say. And last thing, Barkha, since we discussed about Congress, I beg to differ slightly with all your people. I would give, say, for example, Congress a lot of credit for how they have salvaged the situation in Goa, which
Hmm.
shows to some extent a fighter instinct now with people where they can. So, if it's indeed so
Yeah,
close.
it's neck and neck in Goa. Let's go back to the Goa slides.
In
But yeah, go
Uttarakhand,
ahead.
if you see it's that close, I'm quite sure they will do something to get Uttarakhand on the way. And Dilip has left. Punjab, I think Priyanka Gandhi will have to take a lot of the blame because although she was a person visible throughout in the campaign, Rahul Gandhi was not visible. Although
Yeah.
Rahul Gandhi's people may have taken some calls, and that is where I think a point to be seen. And closing, uh, you know, I don't think per se you can remove the Gandhis, but you may see people like Manish Tiwari, Barkha, if you remember one of his statement, he said, I am a stakeholder in the party. I am not a.
Yeah.
So you might find people like him now asserting themselves within the party. All G23 fellows won't do, but some of people like him, you might see them more assertive right now going forward.
I would agree with that last point. And Aarti, Dilip was making the point that Rahul's team would have to change, Priyanka's team would have to change. But what about them themselves? Do you think that there is going to be, if it indeed ends up, Sandeep makes the point that Uttarakhand and Goa are still neck and neck. So we don't know if it's going to be like a zero score for the Congress. But what if it is? Or what if it's even 4-1 with the Congress retaining just one small state, losing Punjab? I mean, what does this mean for the Gandhis? Or is it too early till the results to ask that question? And Aarti's on mute. Can we unmute her?
Barkha, I don't see the Gandhis changing. I think both Rahul and Priyanka have a sense of entitlement as far as the Congress party is concerned. And honestly, I think they see it as a family concern. And I think they believe that they have the right to run the party. So it's really a question of what people in the party do. Do they start leaving? Do they start breaking off? Do they start gravitating towards the TMC? Do they start gravitating towards the NCP? Do they form regional outfits, like Mamta did in Bengal, or like Sharad Pawar did in Maharashtra? I think it's up to party leaders of the Congress, because the Gandhis will remain the Gandhis, and they will continue to function the way they have functioned through all these years. Barkha, they have been losing election after election after election. And, have you seen any change in their behavior? No.
Yeah.
So,
I think, yeah,
I
I
think
agree with you. There's almost a kind of apna time aega mentality that sooner or later in this revolving door politics, our time will come again. And I think Chandar was also making this point that, what happens to the party, and Punjab has been a completely manufactured disaster, many would argue, not to take away anything from the groundswell of sentiment for Kejriwal. Kartike, you want to add to that before I give Jill the last word?
I think Barkha, that I feel that Aam Aadmi Party for me seems to be the more conducive alternative to the Congress in North Indian politics. At least that will be accelerated if Aam Aadmi Party wins Punjab the way these exit polls are showing. I think that for all her effort and for all her political acumen, I don't think Mamta Banerjee will be acceptable beyond Bengal and certain states in the east. And even the Goa result is showing you that. Yeah, I think Aam Aadmi Party is a bigger threat to the BJP hegemony in the Northern Indian and Western Indian states. Gujarat results in the civic poll showed you that. So I think if Aam Aadmi Party gets a proper state at its helm, Punjab, I think you will see a lot of the manifestations in that form, where the Congress, whatever might be happening within the Congress, a natural pole for Northern Indian sort of Congress politicians might become the Aam Aadmi Party. I have had this thought for a long time, and I think the Punjab victory might just solidify this.
Well, I
Barkha,
will
now
take.
you are talking about your friend Prashant Kishore.
I was just going to say, I was thinking to myself that what's interesting is that unless Prashant Kishore has been very silent on what he thinks might happen in these elections, Goa is something that clearly hasn't taken off for the Trinamool Congress at all. And those are all of the interesting ripple effects, Sandeep, and I'm sure there'll be time to do separate programs, in fact, on all of those factors. But in the end, Gilles, if you want to come in with a last thought.
My last thought is,
Can we go to the UP slides as Gilles sums up? Yes. Go ahead, Gilles.
Yeah, my last thought would be to exert caution and advise anyone who's passionate about election to spend the next 2 days reading a book, catching up on movies, spending time with loved ones, and wait for hard facts on the 10th to start actually analyzing the outcome of these elections. What we know is that the Congress in every scenario emerges as a big loser in most states. It might survive in Goa by the skin of its teeth, but given the might of the BJP and the hard will that the BJP has about winning elections after elections are over, I would not be too optimistic. It's too early to tell whether the BJP wins decisive victories, particularly in UP. I still think that the election might be more open than we think, not necessarily to the point that the prediction would be reversed, but in terms of ground loss. But once again, we have to wait for Thursday or Friday?
For 2 days, just 2 more days.
Just 2 days. So much things we can do during these 2 days before.
Okay, so let's all read the sort of go through the pile of unread books by our bedside table is Gilles' prescription as we close. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you, all of you, I'm hoping, on counting day. So Aarti, Chandar, Kartikeya, Sandeep, and Gilles, thank you. And to our audience, I think Gilles is right. It's very interesting for journalists and political analysts to decode exit polls, but you've got to wait for the real McCoy, and that is 2 days away. And we will be back then. The polls do suggest a kind of unanimous pattern, but things can change on the spin of a dime, on the turn of a dime, and we know that in politics. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Thank you, and have a great evening. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.